Bem-vindo a Central City, uma metrópole repleta de drama e comédia humana. Em Central City, o crime estende seus tentáculos por cada esquina. Danny Colt, investigador particular, foi considerado morto por todos. Mas do seu quartel-general no cemitério de Wildwood, ele combate o crime por detrás de uma máscara.
The spirit.
Spirit.
The spirit.
The spirit.
The spirit. The spirit. The spirit. The spirit.
The spirit. Spirit. Spirit.
Spirit. The spirit. The spirit.
The spirit.
Spirit.
The spirit.
The spirit. Spirit.
E era o espírito.
Na segunda metade da década de 30, o jovem William Eisner era um dedicado aluno do DeWitt Clinton High School, onde atuava como diretor de arte nas publicações da escola. Talentoso ilustrador, com um dom para contador de histórias, Will queria se tornar um cartunista.
This is a cover of a magazine into which I stumbled. This was my first professional assignment. Shortly after I got out of high school, I had a job with the newspapers, and I lost my job with the newspapers. I was looking for work. I found the work with this magazine called Wow, which was the first of the comic book type magazines in the United States. It was an imitation of the British children's or boys magazines.
O jovem Will começa a dar mostras do seu lado empreendedor ao se associar a Jerry Iger. A companhia criava histórias por encomenda, para editores que quisessem investir no novo e excitante mundo dos quadrinhos. Iger era um homem mais velho e um excelente vendedor. Will escrevia e desenhava com 5 pseudônimos, além de comandar uma equipe de bons artistas.
Bob Kane was a high school chum, as he used to put it. He always referred to me as his high school chum. It was maybe 2 years after high school I started Eisner and Iger, and Bob was looking for work, and so I gave him a job with me. One day he came and he said, "Will, I can't work for you any longer because there's a chance for a job uptown with Detective Comics. They own Superman." And he said, "They are looking for another character like a super..." They called them in those days costume characters. They didn't call them superheroes. So he left. He said, "They're going to pay me $7 a page, which is more than you can pay me." So I said, "Okay, what can I say?" So he went there and he created a character called Batman. I don't know whatever happened to that character, but...
Jack Kirby foi outro artista que saiu da Eisner e Iger para mudar os rumos da HQ, como criador do Thor, Hulk, Capitão América e Surfista Prateado, entre muitos outros super-heróis e super-vilões. Na corrida pelo rico filão dos super-heróis, valia tudo.
This guy asked me to send us a note and said he wanted a certain character called, he wanted to call it Wonder Man, and he described what he wanted. This guy was wearing a red suit with tights, a skin-tight suit and a cape. And I said to him, I said, "You know, this looks suspiciously like this character Superman down the street." The following month, he was sued by the Superman people, and they owed us $3,000, which in today's money is something like $300,000. You're going to be subpoenaed in court, he said, because they want you to testify on this thing. And he said, "What are you going to say?" I said, "Well, I'm going to tell them the truth. You sent us a note, and I got the note in writing and told describe what you want us to do, and we did it." He said, "If you say that, you're not going to get the money." Well, anyway, I couldn't bring myself to do it, and I told the truth, and of course we lost the money. I seem to have a kind of magical relationship with Brazil for some reason. One of my first assistants was a fellow named André LeBlanc.
Nascido no Haiti e criado em Nova York, André LeBlanc se casou com a carioca Elvira e acabou adotando a cidadania brasileira. LeBlanc ficou célebre no país ao ilustrar o Sítio do Pica-Pau Amarelo, de Monteiro Lobato, além de ter adaptado clássicos da literatura nacional para os quadrinhos.
So I got to know about Brazil from him.
Em 1997, André Leblanc foi condecorado pelo presidente Fernando Henrique Cardoso com a Medalha da Ordem do Cruzeiro do Sul. Leblanc faleceu em dezembro de 1998. O relacionamento de Eisner com o Brasil provaria ser duradouro.
Na outra semana, Rio de Janeiro.
Oh, como vim parar aqui?
I believe probably I must have been a Brazilian in another life, but I can say tudo bem.
Em 1939, Will se alia à Quality Comics para uma proposta ousada. Um encarte de quadrinhos para ser distribuído na edição dominical de jornais de todos os Estados Unidos. A solução de Will, um detetive particular combatendo o crime da metrópole de Nova York, rebatizada de Central City.
The Spirit, as far as I was concerned, was a vehicle for telling the kind of stories I wanted to tell, which is the human drama, the human comedy. So I created a character who really did not take himself seriously. I put a mask on him and gave him a costume because the syndicate insisted that there should be a costume of some kind. And also the Spirit was a vehicle that got me into the newspapers. What we were offering is complete stories, and that was a novelty.
O suplemento traz ainda histórias com os personagens secundários Mr. Mystic e Lady Luck. O Spirit começa a influenciar jovens cartunistas por toda a América, como o criador do Coringa, Jerry Robinson.
I think the first time I saw Will's work, I was still in high school. Philadelphia had a major paper called the Philadelphia Record, and they printed all the comics. That's why I loved to get the Philadelphia Record. And Will first created The Spirit, which was a comic insert in several newspapers. And fortunately for me, one of them was the Philadelphia Record. And so I'd love to get the record on Sunday. I was flabbergasted. It was so different. So, and I came to New York and studied journalism at Columbia. I was 17 and began that same year working on Batman.
Ainda nos anos 40, o personagem batizado de O Espírito aporta no Brasil pelas páginas do Gibi.
Eu devia ter meus 8, 9 anos, estava começando a gostar de histórias em quadrinhos, estava aprendendo a ler e já me chamou a atenção a narrativa, a história diferente, o modo diferente de contar a história que o Eisner usava para fazer o Espírito, que era uma história policial. De jeito nenhum, era para criança, mas eu gostava mesmo. Criança, eu gostava muito da história. Essas histórias eram publicadas no Gibi, uma publicação trissemanal, circulava no Brasil inteiro. E na última folha do Gibi saía a historinha colorida do Espírito. Eu então gostava tanto que eu recortava com todo cuidado, ia juntando, fazia um bloquinho, fazia um pequeno álbum, fazia com cartolina, uma capa e uma contracapa, costurava, eu não tinha um grampeador, eu costurava, desenhava um título na capa e fazia essa coleção de gibizinhos especiais do Espírito.
Um gibi também interceptou os jovens Ziraldo a caminho da missa e mudou o rumo de sua vida.
Eu abri o gibi. Abri e adivinhei o meu futuro. Foi uma coisa impressionante, assim. Fiquei sentado, não fui para a missa, fiquei ali folheando o gibi. E comecei a desenhar sofregamente as minhas histórias em quadrinho, comecei a entender de história em quadrinho, comecei a ficar íntimo dos autores daquela época. Estava até citando todos para eles aí, Chester Gould, Milton Kenneth, Alex Raymond, Al Foster, Bunny Hogarth, né? Eram todos os meus ídolos. Até um dia, que eu estava na casa de um amigo meu, estava lendo uma história Assim, um menino rico que tinha muito gibi, eu ficava na casa dele, assim, tomando os gibis assim, dele emprestado, ele não deixava eu sair da casa, porque custava caro o gibi, né, para o meu padrão. E aí ele deu uma gargalhada, falou, esse cara é um gênio, imagina, o personagem chama-se Ébano Branco. Eu falei, é engraçado, Ébano Branco. Aí cheguei em casa e disse, papai, por que ele disse que é engraçado? O personagem chama Ébano Branco. O meu pai disse, não faço a menor ideia, meu filho.
Era um período em que os Estados Unidos estavam em guerra com a Europa e esse material vinha para o Brasil e os europeus jamais conheceram o trabalho do Eisner na mesma época. Ela começou a ser publicada em 1943 no Brasil.
This is a classic formula. The idea of the story contents were unique to comics because they dealt with human experience, with the human condition, or the human comedy, if you will. But they were fundamental stories. They dealt with fundamental human interaction, human problems, and that's what gave it endurance.
Tem histórias, acho que antológicas. Tem uma onde ele falava da bomba atômica e de um planeta que explodia. Outro é uma história antológica também dele, em que toda a história era focada, era vista pelos olhos de um personagem. E assim vai. Ele me ensinou coisas mil, realmente. Me ensinou principalmente que nada precisa ser igual.
He was wonderfully imaginative in his opening sequence, which really drew you into the story, set the mood, and you can almost smell and hear the elements in the story. And he did wonderful things with the logo. It almost became a trademark, where he incorporated the logo into the theme of the story, very imaginatively. And that was very influential. Will recreated the kind of grit and the noise and the dirt of urban society and urban decay.
Essa questão do Eisner fazer a abertura das páginas com essas letras, essa coisa toda que sempre dá o clima da história que você vai ler. E isso aí muda, porque antes o que era o título da história? Era só fulano de tal em tal história. E de repente não, você mostra onde a coisa está acontecendo, né? Então é muito característico do trabalho dele. E muita gente, com certeza, incorporou isso também nos seus trabalhos.
What I really remember was the sense of personality that came through. And mostly that was through all of the wonderful spirit title pages, the splash pages, where he would set the world that you were in. You know, he would go to the next level in terms of where the spirit, the name would appear and how it would appear. Would it be a building this time? Would it be walking? Would it be underground? I mean, that stuff was just amazing to me.
They wanted to have the logo the same every week, exactly the same, because they said to me, look, we can't advertise this. Each time you make a new logo, for me, the fun and the excitement of working in this medium is to experiment, to explore new ways of doing things.
Pelo seu contrato com a Quality Comics, Will Eisner se torna o primeiro cartunista a possuir os direitos sobre seu personagem.
I knew very early that the only way to have editorial freedom, editorial control, was to own the comic strip yourself, because if you owned it, you could control it. If, as in the case of Superman and Batman and the others, the artists who did them didn't own the property. It wasn't their property. It was like living in someone else's house. I knew I had a very strong poker chip in this deal because they needed someone who could deliver the comic strip for them regularly every week. It was like television is today. They couldn't afford to be late. In the magazine business, you can be a day late or 2 days late. It's okay. But for a newspaper, you have to deliver promptly and on time. Anyway, we did negotiate a deal in which I permitted them to carry the copyright notice on the strip as they published it. But then if, under the contract, if we separated, if I left, then the property would remain mine.
Well, in those days, the publishers owned all the characters. Batman, Superman, those two happened to be owned by the same publishing house, DC Comics, or Detective Comics. And they literally wouldn't buy the material unless they owned the right. That led to really the tragedy of Siegel and Schuster, for example, the creators of Superman. But when they first sold Superman, they sold the 10-page story for $120. And with that contract, the contract was written on the back of the check, which they did in those days. So if you wanted to cash the check, you have to sign the contract, which automatically gave the publishers the rights.
The classic device in most moving picture stories and adventure stories is always to have the hero have some kind of sidekick or somebody, either a father figure, as in the case of Commissioner Dolan, or a girlfriend that they never marry, which is like Ellen Dolan, and a sidekick, which I gave him as Ebony. Now, in the case of Ebony, I treated Ebony quite differently than blacks were treated before. Whilst Ebony was a stereotype caricature, nonetheless, his conduct and his character was something that had not been done before.
I think, in fairness, one can only look at Ebony, first of all, in the context of the times. If you look at the role of blacks in movies and in radio and in early TV, stereotypes were just the fact of life. What Will did, to his credit, was he had a major supporting character who was heroic, who many times saved the spirit's life, and who was a very sympathetic character.
Em pouco tempo, ficou claro que o Spirit era personagem mais complexo do que o típico super-herói.
I regarded always the superhero as a very difficult and very unexciting subject to work with, because for me the superhero is a one-dimensional character. The function of a story, the underlying function of a story, in any story, is the possibility of failure or the possibility of mortality. Since superheroes have no mortality, for me there is no story.
What makes the Spirit special is the fact that he is a human. He's a man, and he has all the qualities that make a human being interesting.
Superheroes offer something very basic in comics, which is they lend themselves well to simple action. They lend themselves well to kind of streamlined stories with good clearly defined, evil clearly defined. The Spirit aspired somewhere else. What the Spirit did was aspired not to the cliches of comic books, but to the cliches of movies. And as a result, was aspiring toward a somewhat higher level of popular culture, because movies already, certainly the noir films that were surrounding Eisner, the films that came after Orson Welles' Citizen Kane and Touch of Evil, let's say, aspired to a slightly more complex notion of the way the universe was constructed, and tried to appeal to an older audience than the audience that the superhero comics were aimed at.
Mais il a pas du tout les valeurs du super-héros américain. C'est peut-être effectivement plutôt un personnage plus proche de la bande dessinée européenne, c'est vrai. C'est un peu l'anti-héros ou l'antithèse du super-héros plutôt.
Com a incrível produtividade de Eisner, entregando um episódio completo, escrito e desenhado por semana, o Spirit se tornou um tesouro, contendo dezenas ou mesmo centenas de boas histórias.
One called Sans Serif, which was kind of his version of a Warner Brothers movie, and another one about a Lorelei, a woman who lured truck drivers to their doom. When they were driving the truck, they would hear the siren song and they would veer off the road. And the way he represented the song was with this very strange set of marks that looked a little bit like notes, but also like a kind of seismograph. Another story that I think is probably one of Will's favorites as well, about a little nebbish, a nobody who learns to fly and jumps off a building.
Os vilões do Spirit são um capítulo à parte. Dr. Cobra, Octopus e tantos outros personagens que também não tinham superpoderes.
I see villains as people with a dimension. My villains in the Spirit were always small villains. They were not men who were to change the orbit of the Earth or to destroy all mankind. And no human being, bad or good, is totally has a total one single streak unless he is insane in some way. Even Hitler liked dogs.
Em maio de 42, Eisner é convocado. O Spirit passa a ser produzido por assistentes. A qualidade cai, mas a série sobrevive, enquanto Will desenvolve quadrinhos de treinamento para o Pentágono.
When I emerged from the Army, I was older, wiser, a little bit more experienced, and my attitude toward people was perhaps a little bit more sophisticated. So I guess you might call it a period of realism that the military left me with.
Eisner podia se dar ao luxo de dedicar histórias inteiras do Spirit a clássicos como A Queda da Casa de Usher, de Edgar Allan Poe.
After the war, by moving toward looking at all the short stories he'd ever read, by thinking of things that were more anecdotal and character-driven, where he was also able to find new visual metaphors for telling, sometimes as simple as just collaging a photograph into his drawing, sometimes as complex as telling two stories that ran parallel in two different tiers, vertical tiers that looked like comic book pages but told parallel stories.
The pre-war spirits are actually preferred by some. I myself enthusiastically feel the post-war spirits from about 1946 to 1950 are the best. I think that's when Will fully matured as an artist and a storyteller, and I think he would agree as well.
I think comparing the pre-war spirit with the post-war spirit is like comparing apples and oranges, because they're very different. Will was a different person as a young man before the war to a man with a family after the war.
Will e Anne se conheceram por acaso durante feriado. Nascia ali amor para toda a vida.
It was nice. I liked him right away. I thought he was very sophisticated, very intelligent, and lots of fun, and a nice human being. And that's what I was looking for.
Anne is my contact with reality. Since I spend most of my life in storytelling, not in fantasy, but in fabricated life experience, it is important for me to have with me someone who is in contact with real life, and is. So I'm very dependent on him for that.
E é casado, no pós-guerra, que Will produz algumas das melhores histórias já escritas para os quadrinhos.
Quem? Spirit! O que aconteceu com você?
Estou bem agora. Sente-se, Dolan, e deixe-me contar sobre Lorelei, a Odisseia da Estrada.
I think that period from 1946 to 1950 or 51, though, are unparalleled in terms of a single artist producing material on a weekly basis of a consistently extremely high standard. And we shouldn't also forget that his young assistant, Jules Pfeiffer, was beginning to help on the scripting as well. And since Pfeiffer, in his own right, is now one of the more highly regarded cartoonists and screenwriters and public commentators.
Jules Pfeiffer chegou a aparecer como personagem no episódio Deadline, Prazo Final.
Every artist, every writer has a preference for a certain kind of woman. We all do, all men do, basically. For me, the most exciting woman has always been a successful, able, competent woman. And so these are the women I peopled my story with. I wasn't thinking in terms of women's liberation. It simply was a reflection of my attitude toward women.
He has never been a male chauvinist, although you might hear me accuse him of it from time to time, but it is only in relation to his forgetting that women must be included in all aspects of life now, not just the traditional roles they used to play.
O que eu mais ressalto, o que eu mais gosto do desenho dele são as mulheres que ele desenha, que são maravilhosas, aquelas boquinhas assim, carnudas, os olhos expressivos, normalmente assim, assustados. As mulheres do Will Eisner são muito interessantes.
Enviando um garoto para fazer o trabalho de um homem.
Eisner tenta lançar o personagem John Law e a série Baseball Comics. As revistas não têm uma vida longa. A série do Spirit começa a encontrar problemas mercadológicos, mas Will nunca chega a pensar em matar sua criação.
I don't think he's killable. I've never really thought of killing the Spirit, and I've been, over the years, been doing the covers for the Spirit magazines. In 1952, I stopped the Spirit because it was getting too much, and also there was changes taking place in the newspaper business. The price of newsprint was going up, getting very high, and so the supplement was very, very expensive, and there wasn't enough room in it to sell advertising to pay for it, and so I felt the future of this thing would be limited.
Com o fim do contrato entre Eisner e a Quality Shop, ele se torna dono de mais de 600 histórias já editadas. Aproveitando a experiência em quadrinhos de treinamento adquirida durante a guerra, Will passa a dirigir a American Visuals, empresa especializada em produzir quadrinhos educativos. Ele é agora um executivo bem-sucedido.
In the late 60s, I was an underground cartoonist, which meant that I was part of the new generation of cartoonists in America who were rebelling against the Vietnam War and the establishment, and our comic books revolved around drugs and sex and breaking all the rules.
By 1970, I was part of the establishment, essentially. I remember my secretary at that time came in and said to me, Mr. Eisner, there's somebody on the telephone who is inviting you to a comics convention. And there I met a few of the hippies. I met Dennis Kitchen, I met Art Spiegelman, I met Crumb, I think I met there too. They look weird. They had long hair, and they wore beards, and they dressed funny. They had glassy eyes. You know, you could smell what they were smoking something. I don't know what they were smoking, but it smelled funny to me. And by 1970, Spirit had been dead for 20 years, and I was amazed that he even knew of the existence of it.
The tradition of telling adult stories in comic strips and making political commentary goes back to the early days in this country. And it's been recognized as a protected medium. However, in the 1950s, there was a widespread effort to censor this kind of speech. As a result of that, the underground comics movement, so-called underground comics movement, flourished. First of all, as dittoed or photocopied works, and then more widely as published works.
The first time I saw any work by Will Eisner must have been in 1964, 1965. It was in a magazine called Help Magazine that my idol Harvey Kurtzman was making. It was a very low-budget humor and graphics magazine by the guy who had made Mad. I began to look in comics shops to find older Spirit comic books.
I first met Will Eisner in the summer of 1970 at a convention in New York City. I was, I think, 22 years old. And there was a comics historian, a Frenchman named Maurice Horn. And I had done, I think, some correspondence with him. And I saw him at the convention, and he said, you know, Will Eisner is a guest here. And I said, I know, I'm hoping to meet him. And he said, well, he wants to meet you. And I said, you must be crazy. Will Eisner doesn't want to meet me. I want to meet Will Eisner. And he said, no, he told me to find you and bring you to his room. So I said, this must be a mistake. But
it was definitely a moment where one had been told, don't trust anybody over 30. And this guy who looked more like Commissioner Dolan than Denny Colt was definitely over 30 years old. I was suspicious of the fact that Will had become involved in these army training comics, and I've never been thrilled about that aspect of his work.
I realized that something very interesting was happening. They were using comics as literature for the first time, as pure literature.
He came from, obviously, an older generation of cartoonists whose rules were very rigid. And when Will did comics, they were aimed at a young audience. When he did work in the newspapers, it was a broad audience, but it couldn't really tackle controversial subjects. And he had to be very careful about references to politics, sex, drugs, anything that was controversial. The underground cartoonists, like myself, I think, revealed to Will that this was a literary art form that had no boundaries, and this was exciting to him.
As histórias do Spirit começam a ser republicadas nos Estados Unidos e no Brasil. O personagem atravessa o Atlântico e ganha novos mercados e novos leitores na Europa.
La première fois que j'ai découvert le travail de Will Eisner, c'était dans le journal Tintin, le journal assez connu en France, en Belgique et en Suisse.
Well, I was fairly prolific during the 1970s, but the business really is a monster, and it controls me. So my own career is on the back burner, and I occasionally do a page. Usually it's when another editor intimidates me. I can't edit myself. But I still regard myself as a cartoonist.
Dennis Kitchen é um editor diferente. Um artista tentando conciliar a ética igualitária da geração hippie com a sua vocação pessoal para os negócios.
When I first started publishing Will Eisner's work, he was still in his business stage. This was about 1970 or 71. I visited his office on Park Avenue in New York, and I was still in my hippie stage. I think he was excited by the fact that comics were undergoing a certain revival and that he was still remembered and highly regarded.
Dennis struck me as a very unusual person because he wanted to publish. He wanted to do the things that were regarded as establishment things. Dennis built a reputation that was quite remarkable. He was respected and trusted by all the underground cartoonists who were afraid of being exploited.
It was he who first insisted that I sign a contract with him. And I said, well, I don't do contracts. And he said, well, I don't do work without a contract. So we had to find a compromise, and of course he won. Basically, he embarrassed me into doing a contract, and I remember at the time thinking, well, Will is an older fellow, and I have to placate him, and really, this is the only time I will ever do this, so why not? But what Will did was, in his own way, he was giving me business lessons, and he was teaching me that this was not an oppressive thing. This was not something that a publisher had to force on an artist. It was something that simply reflected an understanding between two parties.
Will cria e desenha lindas capas coloridas para as republicações dos anos 70. As histórias perdem a cor, mas ganham em dramaticidade.
A lot of fans actually preferred them in black and white, which surprised me because I felt we would be criticized for doing them in black and white. And I think the reason is because Will's line art is so powerful and because they have a certain film noir quality about them. The stories he tells are just as effective in black and white and arguably more effective. My personal preference would be to do them in color, but to do them in color right.
And at that time also, I had a call from Stan Lee, who asked me, he said, would I let Marvel publish a Spirit? And I decided not to. I have always been successful all my life with a small publisher. I find that economically, you may not do quite as well, but in the end, you do better because you're always dealing with someone who will answer the phone to you. If you deal with a very large publisher, sooner or later you wind up dealing with somebody at very low level who may be a very nice person but is unable to make decisions.
Nos conturbados anos 70, Will Eisner finalmente faz sua primeira visita ao Brasil. Os tempos eram duros, a censura atuava, mas também aqui os cartunistas estavam na linha de frente na luta pela liberdade de expressão.
I finally got to Brazil to attend a convention in Avaré. In Rio, I got to Rio first, and I met Ziraldo. We had lunch in a little bistro. We became very friendly immediately. We had a good time talking with each other. I was very impressed with him because he just got out of jail.
Eu cheguei na mesa e estava o Will Eisner. Meu cheiro ficou bambinho. Falei, não posso acreditar. Vou conhecer o cara que desenhou o espírito, o cara que povoou a minha infância de sonho. E a gente ficou amigo íntimo. Eu tenho um grande orgulho de saber que o Eisner, eu vou a Nova York, ele recebe a gente com o mesmo carinho que nós recebemos ele aqui. Ele tem vários amigos brasileiros, já é a 5ª vez que ele vem aqui, ele só não muda para aqui porque ele não consegue aprender português, senão ele mudava.
A essa altura, o Spirit já se tornara um clássico, um desses personagens que passam de pai para filho.
I was totally into Batman and the superhero stuff, and my father talked about stuff that he read. And he used to talk about the Spirit, and he raved about the Spirit and raved about the fact that he was a true superhero in the sense of the action, the adventures that he had done. I finally actually saw a whole Will Eisner Spirit special done for Warren, by Warren Publishing. And some of it was in color and some of it was in black and white. And that's really when I saw a whole bunch of it together like that.
Durante os anos 80, o relacionamento de Eisner com o Brasil se aprofundou. Novas edições nacionais do Spirit e novas visitas de Will ao país.
Lá vem o Bicão no nosso esgoto outra vez.
A gente levou uma capa igual do Spirit, né? Levamos uma máscara e um chapéu, né? E como a imprensa já ia estar aguardando ele, logo que ele descesse do avião, né? A gente falou assim, seria muito legal que ele tirasse umas fotos vestido de Spirit.
Ele tinha enfrentado uma viagem de Nova York até São Paulo, né? Tava bem cansado. Ele botou uma máscara do Spirit e uma capa que os cartunistas tinham trazido e ficou andando pelo aeroporto com aquilo.
E aí foi muito legal, porque ele desceu do aeroporto, abraçou todo mundo, os jornalistas estavam lá, mostramos a capa, ele achou legal, escolheu um lugar perto de umas árvores, viu onde que tinha uma sombra, tirou fotos e as fotos ficaram bárbaras, então foram capas dos jornais.
O primeiro encontro pessoal do Eisner, eu penso que foi promovido pelo Álvaro Moya. Ele visitou nosso estúdio e eu fiquei babando, né? Era o meu ídolo, meu guru, tudo que eu desejava ser na vida como autor, como desenhista de histórias em quadrinhos, estava ali em cores e ao vivo na minha frente. A partir dali se tornou grande amigo. Ele visitou o estúdio, deu autógrafo para todo mundo, desenhou. O Will Eisner realmente fez uma belezinha de material no álbum Nos 30 Anos da Mônica. É uma brincadeira gostosa e uma gentileza, logicamente, uma grande gentileza dele.
O combatente do crime, Danny Colt, ainda venceria a morte outra vez. Dennis Kitchen queria editar novas aventuras do herói mascarado, mas tinha pela frente o desinteresse de Eisner em retomar o personagem e o enorme mito de que o Spirit só podia ser desenhado e escrito pelo seu criador.
The Spirit, the New Adventures, as we're calling it, came about as a result of me shamelessly badgering Will for many years to do new stories. And
one of the major reasons I have refused to do it is because I've already done it. And there's so many other things to do that there is really no challenge anymore to do a new Spirit story.
Finally, I said, well, Will, I understand and respect the fact that you don't want to do the Spirit anymore. I accept this. Why won't you let other artists and writers tackle your character?
I said, well, I will consider licensing you to get some other people to produce the Spirit if you can get only the very best men in the field. But to my surprise, Kitchen Sink got Neil Gaiman, Alan Moore, Dave Gibbons, Frank Miller. They all wanted to do a Spirit story again.
Almost could have charged those artists to do the Spirit, and I didn't have to pay them.
As novas aventuras trazem a marca de Kitchen na volta do colorido e demonstram claramente que o personagem ainda tem relevância para os leitores de hoje.
Pega!
Oh! Ei, ei, ei!
Oh!
The Spirit has been in print almost nonstop since it ended. I think it is unprecedented among American comics that something has continued to be reprinted for such a long period of time, considering that its first run was 12 years, and in the subsequent nearly 50 years, one publisher or another has continued to keep it in print is remarkable. And I think it's the ultimate testimony to the importance of the work.
I am amazed by the endurance of this character. And I think probably what we have on our hands here now is a kind of Sherlock Holmes story, which has a classical continuation.